Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Hello and welcome to the second virtual TOTE Customer Town Hall. My name is Alex Hofling. I'm the Vice President and Alaska General Manager located in Anchorage. I am joined by Greene, the President of TOTE Maritime Alaska, and Neal, who is an economist for the state of Alaska. Before we get started, I'd like to do a quick safety minute pertaining to life jacket safety. And although we're at the end of our summer, I don't think it's ever too late to talk about life jacket safety. So a couple tips I pulled off of a U.S. Coast Guard website. Number one, the best life jacket you have is the one that you're wearing. Number two, your life jacket should be U.S. Coast Guard approved, and you can normally find the U.S. Coast Guard stamp in the interior of the life jacket. The life jacket should fit properly, and it should be, you should get the right life jacket according to your weight, and even for your swimming skill level. And then lastly, the life jacket should be tested for buoyancy and also inspected before each usage. So, make sure we do that and to keep everybody safe. We appreciate everybody taking the time to join us this morning, and we look forward to sharing what's going on at TOTE and also taking a deep dive into the Alaska economy led by Neal. And we've got a chat box option should be on your lower right-hand screen. So if you have a question throughout the presentation, go ahead and drop your question in, and we'll answer it as we move along. And with that, I would like to pass it over to Grace. And before we do that, Grace, I would like you to please share something that you have learned about yourself or some skill you've picked up in this COVID work from home environment. Thank you.
Okay, hey, Alex, thank you so much. And good morning or good afternoon to everybody that's on the call today. Thank you for joining. Something that I have learned in this time is, we've been cooking a lot at home. And so my daughter and I have taken to making homemade pasta. And so that's been really fun for us. It's actually a lot easier than you may think. So there's a lot of great recipes out there online, so give it a shot. Thanks, Alex.
Yep.
Okay, great. Hey, really glad to be connecting with everybody today. I prefer to be out on a river or a golf course or at dinner and visiting with all of you, but this is where we are, and so really appreciate everybody who's taken the time to be here with us today. More than anything, I am truly grateful for your business and your partnership, and really wanted to take a minute to just say thank you to everybody. I know that this year has been quite different than I think any of us could have ever expected. So just wanted to say again, thank you so much for your continued partnership. Today, I'm going to touch just on a few things before I hand it back to Alex, and then we get to hear from Neal. I'll give you an update on our business, talk a little bit about the impacts that COVID has had on us, touch slightly on our performance year to date. We also have a couple upcoming events that I'd like to make a note of. I will touch on our LNG conversion and then close out on our outlook for Alaska in 2021. So a couple things to hit on today. First thing I would like to just make a couple comments on is on COVID. And I am happy to report that we shifted to a mostly remote workforce in the beginning of March, and that has been actually a very successful transition for us. Our performance metrics have remained very strong, and if not stronger in some categories in this environment. We have done this transition with, of course, customers at the forefront of what we're doing. And so you probably all will notice that we sent out some pulse surveys. We've spoken to many of you directly. We really appreciate everyone's feedback as we continue to strive to deliver the best experience possible for you, regardless of the situation. And I'm happy to say that most, overall, all the responses were very positive. And so we really appreciate that feedback and expect that to continue as we move forward. You know, like many of us, I think it's the exception right now rather than not to have been impacted directly by COVID in some way within your businesses. And so we are not an exception. We have had a few positive COVID cases at our facilities. The good news is that safety is one of our core values, and we have a very strong proactive safety culture. So we, as this kicked off, we went through and built a very deliberate process for how to manage and deal with COVID cases. We're grateful that we've only had, less than a handful of incidents. And prior, as this whole thing evolved, we implemented many new processes, procedures, like many of you have in our facilities, to make sure that we mitigate the risk of transmission to the lowest it possibly can be. Our goal in any of these cases is that we have zero primary contacts who have been exposed, and that's done through a number of mitigations such as masks, PPE, social distancing, and heightened cleaning throughout our facilities. That has proven to us to be extremely successful, and we have had zero secondary transmissions when we have identified a positive case, and so that's a very good thing. That's a team effort. That's not just TOTE, that's our partners as well. And so we really appreciate everyone's effort and participation in all of those mitigations that we've put into place. In addition to those mitigations, anytime we do have an incident, we stand up our incident command system. And this helps us to quickly respond to, react, and identify what is happening in the situation, conduct deep cleaning, contact tracing, and most importantly, communication to those who are impacted and to our broader organization. So we're really proud of those efforts, and those are going to continue as long as they need to. So really proud about that. But, I think the important thing here is that TOTE has not missed a beat in this environment, and we've continued to operate very successfully. We, like everybody else on this call as well, we are essential services to our communities. We take a lot of pride in that, and we're really proud that we can in this remote environment. We measure
Well, it looks like Grace is a little broken up, so let's just give it 30 seconds here and see if we can get Grace up and running. Grace, how are you doing? You were just a little bit broken up.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you now. I hear you now.
Terrific. Where did I leave off?
You left off response to COVID, and I think that's probably a safe spot.
Okay, great. So just closing out there, hopefully you got most of what I was delivering there, and that, we have continued to provide the essential service to our communities, much like everybody else on this call has as well. And so we can all be proud of that. A few important dates coming up that I'd like to mention. This year, 2020, is going to be celebrating TOTE's 45th anniversary. Our maiden voyage to Alaska was on September 10th, 1975. So please be on the lookout for a special edition of our Orca report. In that report, we will have embedded a short video featuring our founder, founder of TOTE and Saltcheck, Mike Garvey, and some of our long tenured employees. And we'll also have some additional content on our LinkedIn and Twitter sites. So be sure to follow those and take a look as we get into September for some updates there. Also, in September, we are excited to celebrate Truck Driver Appreciation Week. None of us could be successful in what we do without our truck drivers. So we are going to be doing a couple special outreach activities for our truck drivers that help make sure that we get everything where it needs to be on time. So be on the lookout for that. That's the week of September 14th. Additionally, we have ongoing updates to our terminal operating system, and we are going to be rolling out an entirely paperless gate in Tacoma later in September. So in order to make sure that everyone is aware of and up to speed on what that means for you, we'll be conducting some onboarding and refresher training for our customer portal and the new process. So look for some more information coming from us on that as well. So another important thing coming up for all of us is the election in November. Specifically in Alaska, you will find on the ballot Proposition 1. Proposition 1 is an initiative that would yet again look to change the oil tax structure in Alaska. And this time it would be impacting some of the largest producers in the state, like ConocoPhillips. With the impact from COVID-19, unemployment in Alaska, and 1/4 of all Alaska jobs tied to the oil and gas industry, now is not the time to make yet one more change on our oil tax structure. So TOTE, along with the other Saltcheck companies in Alaska, and many of you as well, I know on this call, are supporters of the One Alaska group. One Alaska opposes Prop 1, and we encourage all of you to ask some questions, get informed on the subject, and certainly for those folks that you have in Alaska who can vote in Alaska, we encourage you to learn about this and ask for your support in opposing Prop 1. If you have any questions at all on this, feel free to reach out to me directly. You can also go to the One Alaska website at onealaska.com to learn more. Okay, I'm going to switch gears now and talk a little bit about our LNG conversion. So the good news is that regardless of everything that has gone on so far this year, we are still full speed ahead on our LNG conversion. We are lucky that our ships that serve Alaska have a significant amount of built-in redundancy, and it is normal for us during the summertime to do routine engine maintenance. And because of this, we're able to now also conduct, while the ship is in service at sea, LNG engine conversions on the ship. And so right now, as we speak, engine number 3 on the Midnight Sun is being converted to LNG. This is the 3rd engine that has been converted at sea, and we're really proud of the engineering team that we have who is working on this project that can make sure that that is accomplished in season without any impact to our regular operations. We are going to continue to focus on the Midnight Sun, and she will be going into the shipyard to complete her industrial work converting to LNG this season. What you can expect is this conversion season will be very similar to the last one, and we are right now kicking off our commercial planning process. We will be communicating with customers in the coming months, and you can count on your account executive to reach out to you to make sure that we understand and will continue to handle your freight needs during these single sailing periods over the winter. Just one more note on LNG. There was a recent article that I was reading, and what it did is it reinforced that not only here in the United States, where clean air standards are very high, but global greenhouse gas strategies and IMO standards validate that LNG continues to be the best fuel for the maritime industry in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and improving air quality in our communities. So this is not news to us, but we are happy to see that continued support for LNG as a fuel in the maritime industry. And again, if you have any questions on that whatsoever, please feel free to reach out to me directly. So the last thing I'll touch here on is just a very brief outlook on how we think Alaska is going to look in 2021. We are in the middle of our planning process right now for 2021. And the way, it's really interesting. I think many of you would agree that there is a significant degree of uncertainty in what the future looks like. However, based on what we've been able to understand so far, we think that 2021 should look more like what we experienced in 2019. We will see continued instability in some of the Alaska market. That's our forecast. Certain segments also will continue to be more impacted than others. But more than anything, I'm excited to have the expert here with us today and look forward to Neal's comments coming up here shortly. So with that concludes my comments. So back to you, Alex. Thank you so much.
Grace, thank you very much. Well done. That was really good. Even with the technology challenge that we had there in the middle.
Glitch there. It's not a real video call unless we have a glitch of some kind.
Right. I'm glad it was short. I'm glad it was short-lived for sure. I was like brushing off my notes. So anyway, thank you very much. So before we kick it off over to Neal, to get people thinking about the Alaska economy more broadly, we're going to introduce a poll, and maybe not everybody's done a poll, so I'm going to ask Lisa to go ahead and pull up the poll. We ask you that you fill it out. We're not going to show individual results, but we are going to show the aggregated results. So the poll question is, how do you predict the Alaska economy will perform in 2021 compared to 2020? So please take a minute and fill that out. We'll show the results. If Lisa has any music to cue, or she can sing it herself, she can go ahead and do that.
Yeah, no music or singing.
Okay, I've submitted my results here. We'll give it just 30 seconds here.
My results are in too, Alex. So hopefully everybody was able to figure this out. This is kind of fun.
Okay, good. Before, as we're waiting, we're really excited to welcome Neal here to join us for the segment here. A little bit about Neal is he is an economist for the state of Alaska for the Department of Labor Research and Analysis. Neal, his focus is on economic data and analysis on a variety of issues facing Alaska. He has authored many great articles on the monthly Alaska economic trends, and I think we all see that around. Neal has also served on the Governor's Oil and Gas Policy Task Force, the Anchorage Economic Development Committee, and the Governor's Technology Task Force, and so much more. It also appears that Neal might be a fan of Seinfeld with the Kramer in the background. So, Lisa, if you've got the poll results, let's go ahead and share those, and then we'll pass it over to Neal. So, interesting. Okay, well, we've got some poll results. It looks like 46% of the attendees, the people who submitted, see the economy is performing slightly better. Second would be flat. Third would be better. We've got some optimism in the room. And then we've got 10% slightly worse, and then 6% as worse. So with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Neal. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. And, maybe I don't have to say anything more. We've done this poll, and that's somewhat, that is a legitimate way to do a forecast. So maybe we have our forecast already here. I clicked on slightly better, so you already know how I feel. It's another beautiful day in Anchorage. We're coming off the best summer I've ever experienced up here. And I've been here in a long, long time. So, it does affect how I, feel about the economy. It's not just the numbers. Those of you, I'm going to move through this pretty quickly because I have about 15 or 20 minutes and I have like 23 slides. If you want more details, as was said, this is Alaska Economic Trends. It comes out every month. It's free. If you want more detail about our economy during this COVID era, We've written plenty about it, and we'll be writing a lot more about it in the future. I myself have not made a forecast for 2021 or 2022. I don't feel like I even have the skills because, for example, Grace talking about all the uncertainty out there, but I will share some other forecasts that have been made. And hopefully I'll give you enough information that you can sort of, well, we've all sort of come up with our own results already. But let's move to that first slide. Thank you, Taylor. This, before I start talking about this stuff, I just want to sort of set the stage very, very quickly, just so to remember, in 2019, we came out of a 3-year recession. Unlike the rest of the country, we weren't doing very well between 2016 and 18. We lost about 11,000 jobs, and all because of the collapse in oil prices. The oil industry itself lost 5,000 jobs, and oil revenues were a big struggle for the state. And then we began to recover in 2019. Things started to kick in. All the construction that was tied to the new Eielson Air Force Base and F-35s. We've had a good visitor season for a number of years. And the oil industry and oil prices started to recover as well, and we sort of nudged in, and we grew by about 0.5% in 2019. At that time, we had already slipped back to where we were sort of back in 2010. That's where our economy was at the end of the recession. And then when 2020 rolled around, or prior to 2020, at the end of 2009, 2020, we assumed these trends were going to continue. ConocoPhillips had a very nice aggressive schedule in the oil patch. The military folks, the Air Force folks were actually going to start arriving, which is actually happening now in 2020. Redeployment folks were coming back, and we were going to have another record visitor season. So we were expecting another, recovery year for 2020. And then we all know what happened in March. We went basically, for this first slide, from the lowest unemployment rate Alaska had ever experienced since we've been keeping this data in the 1970s of 5.9% to a record unemployment rate all in 1 month to 13.7%. You can see we've remained in the double digits, but it has been improving some. I mean, it all happened basically within a week. We went from 1,000 unemployment claims till 2 weeks later to 14,000. When we talk about individuals, we went from about 6,000 individuals receiving unemployment 1 week to a peak of 60,000 a couple of weeks later. Right now, it runs around 50,000. And to put that in perspective, the number of people employed in the state is about 320,000. So lots and lots of people. We all know these kinds of things have happened all around the country. It's not just unique to Alaska. I will point out some of the unique features to what COVID's doing to Alaska, but in many ways, I would say we're sort of in the middle of the pack when it comes to impacts. Next slide. This is kind of misleading, but that's what economists do. This is previous recessions. And then in the bright yellow, you can see where we've been so far compared to those previous recessions. Big hit. In numbers, there's no doubt this will be the worst recession. On a percent basis, it probably will also be the worst because these numbers are just going to get worse just because the numbers are going to remain negative through the rest of this year. Remember, Alaska is very seasonal. So you don't want to compare June to July. You want to compare July to July a year ago. And that's what this is doing. It's looking at the first 7 months of this year compared to the first 7 months of last year. What I do hope, however, is that this is going to be one of the shortest recessions. And I don't think it's going to be anything like the 1980s for those few out there that maybe remember that. But let's move to the next slide. This is getting into the details of where the job losses have been. For that period of 22,000 jobs lost, I don't think there are any big surprises here. This is something that's been experienced in a lot of other places in the country. Leisure and hospitality It's always sticking out. What is that? What is leisure and hospitality? It's your entertainment, which has been hit hard. It's your accommodations, hotels, which has been hit hard. And it's eating and drinking, which has been hit, which is the largest piece of this, which has been hit hard as well. And so I don't think that's any surprise. Local government, retail is taking a big hit. It was already struggling in Alaska, a lot of it tied to e-commerce and to some extent our economy, and that's just accelerating the impact of e-commerce on that industry. One other one I want to point out, I'm going to point out some other industries later on, but healthcare was one of those that sort of humbled us as economists, because back in February, we were sitting around going, okay, what industry might, actually benefit from COVID? We all thought it was going to be healthcare, and that was true around the country, and we all know what happened. That was not the case, especially sort of the outpatient business. Let's move to that next slide. This next slide just kind of puts things in perspective on a percent basis. Let's look at some of the others. Transportation, I'm going to talk about transportation a little later, in fact, but let's go to oil. Oil was beginning to recover again in 2000, end of 2000, in parts of 2019 and in early 2020. But we know as oil prices collapsed, we saw some significant layoffs, and we'll see those numbers a little later. State government has been losing ground, and I'm going to talk about the budget a little bit later, but has really been losing ground since 2014. That includes the University of Alaska, which is really struggling. The only industry that is really growing when we define industry, I mean, in large categories, is the federal government, and that's largely as a result of the U.S. Census. Let's move to the next slide. This next slide gives us the most recent numbers, month to month. And what's been happening is basically since COVID, or since March or April, we've been losing about 40,000. We're down about 4,000 jobs. In other words, 40,000 jobs. In other words, each month, and I'm talking about April, May, June, and July, when we compare those same months in the previous year, we've been down about 40,000. You can see that we have gained jobs from June to July because of the seasonality. But again, you want to compare it year to year. We have the most seasonal economy in the country, and we'll talk about that because that sort of imposes sort of one of those unique features on Alaska's economy. But you can see oil and gas is actually down significantly, down by 18%, and we were still losing ground in July. Construction actually is doing relatively well, even though it's down some. I think these numbers will probably be revised up, and it hasn't been as negatively affected by COVID, and I think that's true around the country. And you can see leisure and hospitality is still taking the largest hit. Local government is also beginning to struggle. This here gives you some feel for the different regions of the state and how they're doing, because they do very differently. Alaska and Anchorage are quite similar in proportion loss. Interior is doing a little bit better because of Fairbanks and the military, and some of their other sectors are not being hit as hard, like retail, like they are more in South Central. The two areas that are taking the biggest hit are Southeast and the Gulf Coast. And I think these are the reasons why. Southeast has been, we know that we've basically lost most of our visitor season. They've lost theirs almost completely, the whole cruise ship thing. So they've taken a huge hit. Here's an example, and you folks that are in transportation might find this interesting, although it's less true in other parts of the state. When we look at transportation employment in Southeast right now, in July to July, it is down by 75%. And the reason why it's down 75% in the Southeast is because the majority of their transportation in the summer is directly tied to the visitor industry. The other reason why Southeast, I think, is taking a bigger hit, and the Gulf Coast, which includes the Kenai Peninsula, Valdez, Cordova, and Kodiak, but particularly Kenai Peninsula, is the concentration, again, of the visitor industry. And also, they've both been experiencing lousy fishing seasons, particularly southeast. Broadly speaking, the fishing season and the salmon season has not been bad statewide. It was pretty good in Bristol Bay and some of the other places, but southeast has been lousy, and so has parts of the Gulf Coast. So some variation. These are some really interesting numbers that just became available a couple of months ago. They're being produced by Harvard and a bunch of other groups. I think they're very heavily tied to credit cards and credit card expenditures, but they provide some insight we've never had on Alaska's economy. And what this is saying is the last time that this was counted, consumer spending in Alaska is right now down by about 6%, which is a heck of a lot better than it was, just a couple of months ago when it was down between 30 and 40%. So we're seeing some improvements there. Restaurants is still in lousy shape. And transportation, I think that's largely due to the lack of air transportation, passenger transportation, certainly not cargo. Let's go to the next slide. This is another slide which is interesting. Groceries are up. We all know that. Look at that peak that they experienced in March. That's a loss to, of course, the eating and drinking sector. The healthcare numbers, I don't give it very much veracity. I mean, how many of us use our credit cards to pay for healthcare? Most of that's done by insurance and third parties. So I don't think that data is terribly meaningful on the healthcare side, although healthcare employment is still struggling to some degree, which kind of surprises me. We thought that would come back more quickly, and I think it will. Let's go to the next slide. This is, one of the big quandaries, and it's not just unique to Alaska, but it's happening across the country. And if we look at statewide, I don't know why I have Anchorage here. I just noticed that. This is an old slide, but the real estate market in Alaska is pretty healthy. We're not building more homes. That is not what's happening. That remains relatively slow. It's a lot like it probably was last year, but sales are doing just fine, like they are across the country. Let's go to the next slide. And I don't think we'll spend too much time with that. There were some indications early on that May was taking a hit, but then there's some more recent data that's telling us, these low interest rates, it appears the real estate market, it remains relatively healthy around the state. Let's move to the next slide. Vacancy rates. Now, this has nothing to do with COVID. We do a vacancy rate survey each year in Alaska and for different parts of the state. So if you want more details about different parts of Alaska, you'll find it in the most recent issue of Alaska Economic Trends. And this survey was done in March. So COVID is really not, and I don't think COVID has had a big impact on vacancy anyhow, but it has been climbing in recent years, largely because we, in the last 3 years have been actually losing some population. It has taken pressure off of real estate prices. And in fact, rentals have become more affordable. Unlike most of the rest of the country, one silver lining that has been taking place in our economy for a while is that housing costs have improved and become more affordable in Alaska, whereas in most other places, just the opposite has been occurring. Let's move to the next slide. This is one of the things that, has kind of hit us hard and sort of puts Alaska in a unique place when it comes to COVID. And that is, it just happened in a really crappy time. Alaska has the most seasonal economy in the United States by a long shot, more so than anywhere else in the country. On a scale, almost 15 times. I mean, there's no one that gets close to us. And what that meant was, and we all know this now because we're experiencing it now, is that we basically, because of when it occurred, we basically lost the entire visitor season this year, which is going to, resonate during the rest of the year, because a lot of that activity that is supported during that short period of time of May through September supports those industries during the shoulder months of January through April and October through December. So it's it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. But it's not just that we lost jobs in 2020 as a result of COVID because of consumer demand and the impacts of closures, but also a lot of jobs just never appeared because of sort of the rapture of the tourism season this year because of the seasonality. You can see that seasonality. This is what would normally happen from the peak months to the slow months, and how much of that 18,000 jobs that we were lost, we still don't know quite yet, but a big chunk of those jobs will never have appeared this year. The one small silver lining in these numbers is a significant percent of these jobs are typically held by non-residents. Let's move to the next slide. This is, we all know what happened with oil prices. One positive, I guess, is oil prices did come back from those very, very dark days when they actually turned slightly negative, something that's never happened before. I never thought I would celebrate $40 oil prices, but I am. Hopefully this will continue to improve. The latest number I saw today was we were at 44. So we are making, I think the oil industry is probably making money right now, or at least keeping their head above the water, but we really do need higher prices for things to get a lot better. Let's move to the next slide. And this is the other one that was sort of scary for a while. We lost production for a while. Another first, very rapidly. It looked like it would last longer than it did, but it's largely recovered, thank God. So that's another sort of positive that did not look like was going to be the case in those dark month of June. The budget. I was asked to talk about the budget. The budget has basically, if you adjust it for inflation, has been dropping for a number of years. We've lost thousands of state jobs since 2014. And that includes the University of Alaska. University of Alaska, as we all know, continues to struggle and still experiencing significant cuts. The budget's going to continue to be a struggle for Alaska. There is no doubt about it. And the budget plays a very unique role in Alaska's economy, unlike probably almost anywhere else in the country. And this is the reason why. It's an integral part of our economy because the Alaska state budget represents new money. In other words, that $10.9 billion is not tax revenues from, sales taxes or income taxes. In other words, it's not just a shuffling of money from one group of people to another like it is in most places. In Alaska's case, these budget numbers are new money that are flowing into our economy. So this will continue to be a struggle. We already probably are a deficit spending, although we do ultimately have to balance our budget. And I think, and another sort of fact that most people don't realize yet is that most of this money now is not coming directly from oil revenues. It's coming from permanent fund earnings. About 5% of the permanent fund earnings each year is now being dedicated to our budget. And it's going to be interesting to see in future years how much of that we're going to be eating into. Right now, we've basically used up all of our other savings accounts. The last savings account we have is permanent fund, and to be more specific, the permanent fund earnings account. So this is going to continue to be sort of a break, sort of a negative, I think, in our economy. Let's move to the next slide. There's some real positives out there, strangely. International cargo traffic has remained really nice and healthy. I mean, that part of the airport is, grim. The number of passengers coming through are down by 60 to 70%. But international cargo traffic looks real good for Alaska. That's one of the big positives right now in our economy. Let's move to the next slide. Another positive is the military. With the deployments returning and with F-35, there's been some slowdown because of COVID, but it's still going forward. This is another positive that's occurring in our economy. And let's go to the next slide. Another positive is mining. Mining prices are very healthy. The industry's had some real challenges, but it's remained healthy. Gold prices are good, silver prices are good, copper prices are looking better. I think the outlook for this industry remains very positive for Alaska. These are just, the letters of how does our economy recover. It's not going to go V's out, because I don't think it's going to be a quick recovery. I think our poll was probably more accurate, maybe more towards the U shape, or if you're from Oregon, maybe the swoosh. We will see. But let's look at a couple of forecasts that have been made. This is Muhsin Gutabi's forecast. He's been brave enough to do that and been asked to do that. This is his forecast for the next couple of years. He does think we are going to begin to recover in 2021. And, this is contingent on that we do get some grasp on COVID. As you can see on the bottom is this contingent, and then continue to recover in 2022. But it looks like it's going to take at least 3 or 4 years, at least that's the general feeling, to get back to pre-COVID levels. Right now, when we look at, for example, July of 2020's employment, it looks a lot like the year 2001. That's how far back we go to find equivalent levels. I think we'll recover more quickly than that. Let's move to the next slide, if we can. This was a forecast that was done for Anchorage by the McDowell Group, and again, it's very similar to Muhsin's, dropping significantly in 2020, and then starting to slowly recover. And maybe this is more optimistic, believing that maybe we'll get back to those basically pre-COVID levels by 2023, possibly 2024. I'm just hoping that there's a huge amount of pent-up demand, and I hope the national economy, so much of it is contingent on how well the national economy does, will have a big impact on Alaska. And that's because it will have a big impact on the demand for oil and a demand for the visitor industry. And lastly, and just some light, to end this on a light note, is looking at, we've heard a lot about what have people been doing with COVID, what are their drinking habits. So I actually looked at the data. There's great data out there on these mind-altering drugs because there are taxes. That's my one argument for taxes, is it generates wonderful statistics. And as you can see, what's happened is hard liquor consumption has actually increased. So there are a lot of people drinking behind doors these days. Wine consumption is also up. Normal big beer is, because we tax it at a different level than craft beer to encourage local production, is about the same as it was. And craft beer, of course, has taken a huge hit. That's not unique to Alaska, but it's happened all over the country because breweries were forced to close, and a lot of bars have been closed, and restaurants have been hurt, and craft beer demand has dropped as a result. Let me just mention one other thing that's happened for mind-altering drugs. Another essential business that has remained open along with liquor stores are marijuana dispensaries. You all know that marijuana has been legal here for many years. And it appears that COVID has given it a very big boost. We are now at record sales. In fact, our sales have almost doubled, at least in value, between May or June of 2020 and June of 2019. And sort of, I'm kind of done with my remarks and be happy to entertain any questions.
Neal, well done. That was excellent. Lot to consider there. I know we're running a little bit short of time, so I'll speed this up. Yeah, thanks for your insights. We're going to do another polling question before we wrap this up. So Lisa, if you could pull up the poll. Oh, we have a question here. I don't know if I can find that question. So the polling question is, how do you forecast your business's performance in 2021 compared to 2020? So please take a minute to fill that out. We're talking instead of not about the entire economy, but about your business specifically. And again, we're not going to show individual results. We'll just show the aggregate there. And so, okay. I don't see any other questions. And if you do have a question, we will please reach out to us directly. I want to thank first all of our customers. Obviously, thank them for not just showing up here and participating in this town hall and taking your taking the time, but obviously, also for being a customer of TOTE and supporting us. We really, really appreciate it. And I also want to thank Grace, you for your time, and Neal, thank you so much for your all the prep work and for your time and your insights. So going back to the poll, so it looks like most folks see a 2021 as somewhat a recovery year. So 56%, slightly better, 23% better, and 18% flat, and we have nobody looking at a slightly worse or worse 2021. So really good insights there. For those joining us, feel free to reach out to your account executive or anyone on the TOTE team for follow-up questions or to learn more about what we discussed today. And thank you again to Grace and Neal and everybody for joining. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Neal. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah.